Let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes in
What is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of In the Clouds. I am your host, Stu Miniman. We are smack in the middle of summer, so it only makes sense that we talk about a very hot topic in the industry, and that is generative AI. In my career, there's been so many hype cycles. There's been technologies that have come that have met the promise. I think back to the first time I saw the internet and really thought that it would be something that would have a lasting impact. And of course it did. There's other things that have come with lots of hype and didn't meet the expectation that we have. So understanding that can be an interesting one. And I'm happy to bring on the program, first time guest to this program, but somebody I've known for a number of years and might be the longest tenure Red Hatter that we've had on In the Cloud. Mike Ferris, he's Senior Vice President of Corporate Development and Strategy. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. You're down, looks like you're in the tower today, yes?
I'm in the Red Hat Tower in Raleigh, North Carolina, wearing a sweater in 90-degree weather. So go figure.
Yeah, it's like, when I go to a conference, it's you go to Vegas, it's 110 degrees outside, but you better have long sleeves and an extra layer because they crank the AC. So we know how it is. It is hot up here in the Boston area. I was actually in the Boston office the last couple of days. Most of the country has been getting quite a heat wave. So summer's usually hot, just like AI has been around for a long time, Mike. But we are at, I think a lot of us feel we've been at a real inflection point in this last kind of 6 to 12 months as AI. Before we jump into all the AI, though, give us, to give the audience a little bit, just the quick thumbnail of your background. And as I said, you've been with Red Hat quite a long time.
Sure. So, I started my career. I did the computer science master's degree in math and did all the typical stuff. I was going to be a developer, and was excited by it. I still remember in college my first Fortran class, to date myself a little bit, that I took. I actually produced a working thing at the end of the problem set, and it just set me off on this. But I learned kind of through the first job or two that I have in tech companies that I really enjoyed understanding the technology and translating it and getting people interested in it, but then also helping form the direction. So naturally, there was about product management at that time for me. When I started with Red Hat in the year 2000, my focus was really to help us turn into an enterprise company. At the time, Red Hat was absolutely a huge success. We had Red Hat Linux, which predates Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and Fedora as well. And certainly kind of a lot of the incentive there was really to take the open source community and take what they were doing, work with them in it, help mature it, but then also package up what they had. And it was very much, I remember a lot of the early product management discussions we had were really around the Pantone colors for the boxes that were going to go on the store shelves, or how we actually engage with customers. And I remember one product we had in the early years, we actually had Red Hat baseball caps that we sold with the box itself in order to make sure people understood our brand. So a lot of it was really just getting started. I was really part of the core team and did all the initial pricing and launched Red Hat Enterprise Linux, actually Red Hat Linux Advanced Server 2.1, if you want to get specific. But I ran that product for the first 3 releases up until Red Hat Enterprise Linux 4, and then really moved into a couple of areas like exploring new technologies, launched a desktop product. We purchased a division of Netscape Security Solutions at the time. But it really wasn't until around 2007 that Amazon was starting with their their cloud. It started with storage, for all of you who remember that, that I really started to see, and others at Red Hat started to see this opportunity for us to start emerging into this world, because we had a very strong base of users and customers of Red Hat Enterprise Linux that, we had taken this concept of very amorphous, complex open source and made it consumable for them. And they were starting to ask about, well, what do I do about, more flexible consumption? How do I actually use this? And Amazon certainly had started with their cloud motivation. And when they came out with EC2, we were there. And I did a lot of the initial work in building out not just the business models, but also worked with just a very handful of a small handful of Red Hatters to actually build the first Amazon machine images for Red Hat Enterprise Linux itself. And we put it out in beta form for a couple of years, and it really started to take off. So we realized that at that point, this concept of moving to the cloud, being able to engage with customers, give customers something more consumptive, but also very much based on the same consistency, reliability, security, all the things that we had built on premise in the enterprise with our key ISVs, OEMs, and everyone else. It was really around how do we actually do that in a more flexible, but still maintain all those core assets as people move into this cloud environment. So that turned into what we did with Microsoft in 2015, certainly the Google relationship. And now I think we have over 1,400, I believe, certified clouds that engage with us, both on obviously Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but also OpenShift, Ansible, and then a slew of other products. And, it has become, frankly, just one of the options that customers have when they engage with us. Most recently, though, as we all know, through the IBM acquisition, we've had other changes inside Red Hat, independent of IBM, to be very clear. And so I've moved into the corporate team. So I'm the corporate leadership now, and my focus is really around how do we take a lot of the things that we did early on and continue to evolve them. So working with obviously Chris Wright, Ashesh Bhatt, the focus around what we do with the finance team, and Bobby and Carolyn and everyone else. How do we continue to evolve our models, and where do we need to invest strategically? So we do have a lot of key conversations around strategy leading to how we actually engage in our offering models, what we do. And a big part of what I also do, though, is very much help communicate what's going on in the market, what we're doing, and really help keep everybody together and make sure that we're all headed in the same direction. So for those Red Hatters listening to this, we certainly do have, core strategy and North Star and all the things that you may have seen, but very much critical for what we're doing.
Yeah, no, Mike, so important there. Yeah, I lived through a lot of that history. It's funny, when you were the product manager for RAS and RHEL, I was a product manager at EMC, and my poor engineers had gone through the 2.4 to 2.6 Linux kernel changes, and we were killing ourselves just trying to get, Linux to work in an enterprise environment until you came out with RAS and then RHEL, and that became the mandate for our customers. We told our field, you use this because it works, and otherwise, we had a page and a half of all the BIOS and patches and fixes that they would have to use, as opposed to, Red Hat simplified it for the environment. So I had a long history understanding that trust, reliability, and security that Red Hat had built into the product. Became an analyst and watched the whole cloud journey, and joined 3 years ago because really had appreciated Red Hat and what we were doing. And I'm glad, Mike, you and I crossed paths at some of the cloud shows over the years and the like, because when I joined Red Hat, I want to help, and took over this show because when you think about cloud, Red Hat's not the first company that you think of, because we are not a cloud provider, but we absolutely make cloud environments and customers' hybrid and multi-cloud environments so much better. We should probably, we're almost 10 minutes in. We should get talking a little bit about AI, though, which was kind of the general topic, because you and I could talk history and cloud, all day. So as I said in the intro, AI is not a new topic. It's something we've been talking about, kind of automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence for, decades. And from a historical standpoint, from even the earliest days of computing, the discussion about what machines can do and can't do has been there. I'm a big fan of Walter Isaacson's biographies that he did, and he did a book called The Innovators, where he talked about Ada Lovelace almost 200 years ago, saying, "Oh, you talk about like machines can only do what humans tell it to do." So if you look at Alan Turing looked at what Ada Lovelace had said, and it was kind of the challenge is like, well, can machines ever be like humans? Can they replace humans? Can they do more than humans? The whole discussion of like the singularity. And Ada Lovelace's premise was no, because they start with the code that the humans have written as that as the base point. So AI is not new, but as we said, like generative AI is definitely taking this to a whole new level.
Yeah, and I think a key difference now is it's not starting with the code; it's starting with the data, right? And I've been a fan of what's been happening in the data science world. I've been watching that. Certainly, we have teams that use that, and data scientists inside Red Hat that we try to make sure help evolve the company. But really, I see AI now as kind of the evolution of data science combined with that code that you were mentioning. And so being able to combine that puts a whole nother dynamic on it. And I would like to say something else in that, it started, when the discussions around computers, but it goes all the way back into philosophy and logic. And, historically, it's the concept has always been there in science fiction. And so, this thing that is emerging now that I would say, it's being tested in many ways. I was reading an article this morning and how one of the main AI companies in the industry is being investigated now for how they're using data as well, right? It's not just ongoing from companies. It's like now the government's getting involved. And so these tests of what's happening here, I think will be quite interesting to watch and mature, but it's really all about the data and how the data can be used to benefit society, benefit, where the world is going. Much in the same way we spoke about open source and have been speaking about open source early, from the early days of Red Hat. Like, how can we make the world a better place using open source? How can we start to evolve that? And I think, it's open source itself has proven its way into the enterprise, into pretty much every aspect of everybody, at least on this podcast's lives. And now the question is, AI has as well, whether you know it or not, but now everyone's starting to realize it. And that concept of making it known and understanding how generative AI and just being able to query and do inference, is going to really start changing how things happen. So I think we're in a very similar inflection point with open source, where it became part of everyone's lives. Now I think AI is going to as well, and we need to test it. We need to make sure it matures. But those are going to be the things that make big differences in what our enterprise customers, our end users, and general population actually, and how they engage with AI at this point.
Yeah, you bring up such a critical, important piece. When I think about cloud computing, I remember I was blogging about it in the early days of cloud computing and talking. And the average person, if they don't work in IT or IT related things, they would take advantage of cloud, but they didn't actually interact with it or anything like that. As opposed to generative AI, I hear about it on the radio. I talk about it with friends and family who aren't in our industry. So it touches and has an impact. And even I have a niece that uses it to help with certain writing. Heck, when I wanted to do social media for this, broadcast, I, went into ChatGPT and said, hey, give me a few options as to how you can do things. Or, other relatives, if you want to do apply to a job, your opening letter, go ask, because they'll actually give you better keywords and you'll have a better result, improving your chances to be able to get through, because the screeners are all automated. So you're almost letting, the robots battle it out to try to help
and the concept of, two AI engines or two AI environments prompting each other to, accelerate this. I mean, there's all kinds of questions around, the accuracy, the predictability, frankly, the heritage of where these things are coming from. And so we want to make sure that, bias is a key part of the discussions as we go forward. If you're not familiar with it, go look it up. It's a key question, but it's something that, everyone is talking about now, and how we actually engage appropriately with these systems, and the systems themselves engage together. Because obviously, as we talk about the world of automation in enterprise IT, we talk about how things mature. There's all kinds of opportunities for new interfaces to emerge, and we need to make sure we govern those appropriately. I am a huge fan of core tenets, And whenever I start a project or try to look at something that's happening, I really try to suss it down to what are the core elements that we're really trying to accomplish? What are the truths that everyone believes in? And I think we're at that point in AI now that it's established. Everybody knows it's there. It's been popularized in much the same way kind of the Netscape browser popularized the World Wide Web. We're going through that same iteration now. So it's a question of how does this evolve? What are the tenets? What are the rules? And how do we actually make better use of what AI can actually provide going forward?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The mention I heard on the radio recently was talking about, the various, government agencies that are trying to figure out, do we stop this? Do we put, limits in place? In general, the discussion is what's the technologies created? It's kind of tough to stick the genie back in the bottle. So it's here, but, to your point, bias, key tenets, certain ethical considerations are hugely important in this space. And those of us in the technology world, we understand usually it's like, can technology be good or bad? Well, it helps if we understand it, understand what we're doing, and don't just let things go a little wild. So, Mike, I guess, the question I talked about from a cloud standpoint, Red Hat's not the first company that you think about when you think about cloud. AI, can you help us understand a little bit from a strategy standpoint? How do you look at this space? Where does it play into what we are doing, how we work with our partners, how we work with our customers, and of course, as being open source, the broader communities that are in this space? Because as you noted, open source is already playing a key part in generative AI, and there's been lots of discussion out there about that.
Yeah, let me start with that because it's obvious that, in the same way open source really helped evolve the concept of algorithms and systems and made things much more accessible and accelerated the ability to create solutions. Red Hat certainly participated in that. Every major ISV, every major customer, everyone in the world has benefited from this. I think AI is going through a similar evolution, and certainly when you talk about the open source concepts being applied to AI, the number of models, and if you're not familiar with foundation models, please go research that. But the concept of AI models being developed in different ways, again, with these questions around the data heritage and rights and everything, but the concept that's being developed is actually massively engaged and improved with open source concepts. If you go look at, and not to plug them, but Hugging Face as an example, thousands of models available to users that really show kind of the breadth and this community aspect of being able to develop something and really engage. The reason I bring that up is that is not where Red Hat is focused, right? So certainly in our partnership with IBM and what they're doing with Watson X, we'll continue, working with model providers. We'll do that with the other providers in the industry. But overall, as we start talking about what Red Hat's doing, it's a real challenge for any company to remain focused because, especially as you said earlier, in a hot topic like this, it's really easy and exciting to go, pursue the next shiny object. And we don't consider it boring to go back and look at, making Linux reliable for the enterprise. We see it as mission critical because that's how we help engage customers, how we help maintain our resiliency as a company, and how we also contribute back to the community. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, our focus here is very much to help build platforms for customers so that they can build, deploy, maintain the models that they're building using partnerships like we have, as I mentioned, and including foundation models for others and working with there. So we're going to help build the models we're going to help the customers build the models or our partners build models. And the way we're doing that is with a platform, OpenShift AI. But also we're also using AI as part of our infrastructure. So being able to make things and how people use our products more efficient, more scalable, and faster is really kind of a core aspect of what we're doing. A good example of that is what we launched at Red Hat Summit this year, which was certainly Ansible Lightspeed with Watson Code Assistant. So really taking this repository of Ansible playbooks that customers have been building up over the years and giving it back to them in a way that they could actually automate the construction of new playbooks, manage those and deploy those in a much better way. And so really taking the concepts of AI and enabling customers to build their own solutions, build their own, maintain, and deploy their own models with Red Hat, but then also take what we know in the industry in the database, in our case, playbooks for Ansible. We have other incentives that we're going down here that we're going to be engaging in, but use those to help customers interface with our products much better. And so that could range anywhere from what we're doing on the support side, which we've always had, recommendations and affiliations based on data we've had. But AI starts to build a much better infrastructure for us to really relay that back to customers. So helping customers with products, but also helping customers use the products we have much better. Those are kind of the two core directions that we're taking there.
Yeah. So Mike, we talked a little bit earlier about kind of the partnerships that you help drive with the hyperscalers that we've got. When we look at the generative AI space, Microsoft, Google, Amazon throwing a lot of money out there. It's
Absolutely.
like, it's funny. I just got an email this morning and said that the amount of equity put into generative AI was $14 billion year to date. Now, 10 billion of that was OpenAI, which was pretty much Microsoft. But even the $4 billion was more than last year for the entire year. So again, we are not going to be a cloud provider, and there's certain things that we're going to need to work with in that space. So can you talk a little bit about, how we look at what we're doing, how that intersects with our partners in the cloud, and then the other one that, we usually need to be able to explain a little bit more is there's times that we're working with IBM because IBM Research has some awesome tools. You mentioned what we announced at Summit and Ansible Lightspeed. Explain a little bit how those products go together. And Red Hat, we're staying independent, but we are partnering and working closely with IBM on some of these solutions.
So loaded question, lots of them there. Let me start with some basics on how do we see it. And I'll tell you, we're still thinking this through because the industry is not done. It's not wholly defined yet of how monetization is going to occur in this for companies like ourselves.
Come on, Mike, we're almost a year into it. It should be all sorted.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it only took Red Hat from 1993 until 2002 to figure out how to create a subscription model, as an example. So from the concept of where we think we are and where we see, we are talking about what does AI really mean? And to the users, developers, platform engineers, what I believe strongly is that AI is just going to become part of the daily lives. Of course, there's going to be machine learning AI operations folks and systems and processes. It's going to be management of models and being able to manage that. They'll use some of our tools to do that. They'll build their own models. And so there's going to be pieces there. But more importantly, just take the example of a developer. I certainly see a lot of concepts around how this will just be yet another tool and concept in the same way that, if you remember, again, trends, object-oriented program just became how people programmed along the way, or using the cloud, talking about hybrid and where you're going to deploy your applications. This part of the language. I see artificial intelligence becoming part of the common lexicon that everyone is going to have to engage with, consider in order to get that value advantage when they build applications for their users in order to really accelerate how their companies, their services, their capabilities are viewed in the market. So I do see AI as being pervasive, just like probably everyone on this podcast is also using AI, whether you realize it or not. That will just continue so that it becomes part of everyone's lives. Of course, there's still the questions that you're mentioning on ethics and everything else that's there. Now, what does this mean for Red Hat and partners, and then Red Hat and IBM? So one of the things, and you probably have mentioned this on previous podcasts, we've been very careful. We and IBM have been very careful in the industry to ensure that Red Hat maintains our neutrality across partners. This is similar to us making sure we maintain our relationships and affinity with the open source community. We want to make sure that when we engage in any technology, any offering, any business model, that a customer or user sees Red Hat as this neutral entity that we connect, right? We engage, we work with, we create models that allow flexibility and choice. I mean, we don't talk about choice as much in the industry as we used to, but it is still a core theme of what any enterprise, any customer is going to have to think about as things evolve. And so when we talk about what we're doing with artificial intelligence and our engagement with other partners, we absolutely are doing this across not just the clouds, but hardware vendors, and making sure that as they evolve their models, as they have new APIs that are developed, that we make sure we can plug into those in the same way that we are plugging today into what IBM is doing with Watson Code Assistant and Ansible playbooks, or sorry, Ansible Lightspeed. So, all of this is really coming down the fact of that, we are incorporating artificial intelligence capabilities, not just into our products, but building products so that customers can build their own AI capabilities. But it's also going to be part of how we see our interfaces with developers, the open source community, the partners themselves. So we certainly know where Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and other partners are going in their AI initiatives. Huge investments. It's awesome. But we also need to be able to leverage that. And we want to be able to take that to other partners and to customers and be that conduit across all of this in the end. Now, related to IBM, certainly, this was a wonderful first case, right? In that we had Ansible, our customers have a lot of playbooks they've been developing over the years. They've got a repository. That's the data that everybody's going to engage with. And then IBM with Watson X and the launch of it over the past several months, has this awesome framework and foundation models that are being built and ways of doing that, frankly, that has strong affinity and runs on OpenShift AI. So we're down this path of saying the first partner that we can build a product and an interface with in the market, yet still retain that affinity and that neutrality so that we can engage with others, is absolutely going to be with IBM. And certainly Dario Gil at IBM, being the head of the research group, has a lot of affinity and knowledge. I presume you've had him on your podcast. Hopefully you can get him. But overall, this direction that we're taking is very much, how do we take that knowledge and the ability, especially for enterprise customers, to protect their intellectual property in the playbooks that they've developed, yet provide that through the training or the retraining of the models that IBM can do against their foundation models built on playbooks, and provide that back through Red Hat and Ansible Lightspeed, that then provides the output or the inference, if you will, into Microsoft VS Code, where the developers are sitting for the playbooks themselves. So being able to take this combination of a Microsoft partner, a Red Hat Ansible Lightspeed environment, and Watson Code Assistant, and combine these, is a great example of how artificial intelligence, the data itself, the playbooks, the learnings that can be driven from that, gets provided all the way out through to the developer in the native tools that they've adopted and are using in mass. And that's where VS Code comes in. So, that great connectivity is just an awesome example of how, that first step. What we want to do certainly in this is make sure that extends to other environments, other languages, other offerings, and that we build that. Certainly Microsoft and what they've been doing with GitHub and OpenAI certainly has a lot of foundation there. That's a massive source of data. Obviously, there's questions around intellectual property and AI, but as we get through that as a globe and as a population, I do see great advantages. And Red Hat, we intend on being that platform across the hybrid cloud that everyone can engage with, both with Enterprise Linux, OpenShift, and OpenShift AI, again, extending the models and extending that capability we have to everyone.
Yeah, well, Mike, you did a fantastic job. I gave you a few questions, and I think you answered all of them in that piece there. Boy, yeah, and you talk about IP. I know, like at the most recent KubeCon, I heard about the board discussing those kind of things. Do we trust the code? Can we allow that code in here? So there's still a lot of some of those fundamental tenets that need to be baked out there. So I guess, Mike, last thing, we had a number of announcements. You touched on them from Red Hat Summit, but if you could just give us, what should we be looking for from Red Hat as we look at this kind of for the next 6-12 months?
So certainly as we've already launched, and I'll talk just about the AI side. We've got the Ansible Lightspeed with Watson Code Assistant out. You'll see more offerings come from us, but most importantly, I think you'll see OpenShift AI and its use in the industry and the capabilities that we have surrounding that start to extend to other areas. We've been pretty open that, and if you think around where the computing landscape is going, and since it is, and AI itself is also driven by this concept of data access, data proximity or location, edge is becoming a massive, interesting point in the industry. This includes not just, fun ones like automotive, which we've announced engagement with. But certainly as you get into manufacturing, as you get into telco, we just launched an announcement with Nokia around, actually, we're going to be, their core platform for what they're doing in core networks and RAN. So, overall, the question is, as things extend, as this computing hybrid cloud itself extends into the edge, artificial intelligence is going to have to be a key part of that. And there's going to be some good questions in this. So certainly, hopefully everyone is reasonably aware that it is quite costly to efficiently build the models. Now we have to talk about how do we actually query the models or do inference, and especially doing inference at the edge, because that's where the data is. That's where the reaction times are going to have to be driven very quickly. And that's where you sitting, in your home or standing at a terminal somewhere want to know the answer immediately using whatever device you have. And so the question is, how can we start to extend that? We've already made significant inroads with some of our new offerings. We're going to continue that. And artificial intelligence, as I said earlier, as kind of a core part of our overall platform and what we see engaging with everyone, will get extended to there as well. So, it's an interesting time, because as you talk about this cloud or this hybrid cloud environment, we're using everything from a public cloud to a private data center, now out to the edge. How do you get that consistency across there? I'll go back to the beginning of our conversation. We talked about Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and we made it consistent, we made it reliable, we made it secure, and then we moved it to the clouds. Well, now with OpenShift and OpenShift AI, we want that same platform, that same consistency that can reach out to the edge as well. Public clouds, data centers, all the way to the edge. And it's that capability and that consistency and ability for a user to retain their skills, or a company to retain the skill sets, to extend those to new platforms, to integrate these new concepts like artificial intelligence, and make sure that gets driven all the way out to every environment that they're deploying, that we really want to help enable. And that's something that we built Red Hat Enterprise Linux on, and it's absolutely incredibly interesting right now, but also important for us to be able to extend that and keep those same core tenets that built Red Hat from the start and extend them out to everywhere else as well.
Yeah, Mike. Some of the AI things that you just discussed has been pretty interesting for the last couple of years. I've had a lot of conversations with some of our public sector customers. Actually, my most popular one of these live streams was we had the lead of space from IBM talking about how the AI inferencing that you need to be able to do in satellites or up on the ISS, running on Kubernetes and the like. We've talked to lots of customers about like what Lockheed Martin is doing with their drones, being able to do training in a central location, often in the cloud, and then you need to be able to do the inferencing, on a smaller edge device.
Yeah, and not everyone's going to realize that that's what they're benefiting from. The end. Back to my point of artificial intelligence is part of everything. And now that the hybrid cloud is looking even broader than it was, extreme examples being in space, the questions are going to be like, how do you actually engage with that if you're part of the companies building those in a way that can scale? But if you're a user of it, you're going to benefit if those companies can engage and really drive that usage, as you were talking with those two envarments.
All right. So Mike, final thing, if I can ask you a personal side, are you doing any tinkering in this space? I've got friends that love the artwork that can be generative AI. We got together in Boston, and we were seeing, what kind of fedora art, could come out of the generative AI. As I said, I've been playing around with some of them to just seeing how I can find it to be, useful for jumping off or ideas or brainstorming type of things. How about yourself?
I've done what everyone else has done, at least with ChatGPT, right? I've gone out, I've played with it. We sat around the last family holiday we had, and we had a kind of a interactive session with my extended family, just querying ChatGPT, going that path. I played with obviously the generators for photos or for everything else in there. But one thing that I'm personally interested in is I like cars. It's kind of a hobby that I'm involved with, and I'm trying to find a way, not new cars, but old cars, of really starting to apply this. A big problem that I deal with is, how do you find parts? Like, how do you get knowledge? And I do think there's a lot of questions, and I go to YouTube a lot to watch things there. How can we collect those things in a way that can actually be generated? Is there a different type of model that could be matured there? I'm not sure yet, but it's something I'm interested in discovering, because it's a hard thing. And I spent a lot of time, granted it's hobbies, I spend a lot of time looking at that, but I'd also like to make sure that I can help accelerate. And I do see that as a way of maybe turning into something else. I've been a fan of unstructured data and information. I spent a lot of time with relatives. I talk to them, and I just think there's a lot of stuff that isn't even captured that would love to do that. And frankly, I don't know how to get that in, but then I would love for, AI to be able to really build something around that. So just, random thoughts in that, but thanks, Stu.
Yeah, awesome. No, just lots of possibility out there, and definitely, hopefully, things that can have improvement and make us all a little bit more efficient in what we're doing. Well, hey, Mike, thank you so much. As we said, to any of the Red Hatters that are listening in, be sure to check out the source page that Mike and his team launched recently. It was the short video that he had done for an internal audience that prompted this discussion. It's been awesome catching up with you. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and viewpoint with the audience here.
It was great. Thanks for the time.
All right. And everybody, we'll be back with more episodes as we come. Feel free to, reach out if you've got questions for us, topics you'd like to cover, or guests you think we should have on. As always, thank you for joining us on your journey in the clouds.